I was stuck for a long time because I wasn't telling the truth about myself to myself and to God. And I was trying to kind of play nice with God and try to be reverent and quiet and that kind of thing. And it just was not creating the healing that I needed to create because I wasn't in the place of being able to radically declare what I needed to say.
Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm Cherie Burton, and this is episode 18 with my good friend and soul sister, Jen Marco. She and I got really real in this discussion, and I hope you will take it in the spirit that it was intended. We don't mean to be irreverent, but we also are in a space in our lives, I guess, where we just kind of want to call out distortion and dissonance where we see it. Loving Jesus over tradition. It's kind of a touchy, controversial subject, but I think we handled it really well. So I hope you enjoy our discussion. The music that you listened to at the beginning, that was Jen's voice. She really has a powerhouse gift. I've had her sing at many of my retreats and events and even did an on-demand concert in my living room with my kids. The thing about her is she's not afraid to speak out or speak up. The medium of music can be a very powerful carrier of spirit into our hearts, minds, and souls. She's been on big stages. She's sung with some big name people. She really is carrying that on too with her family and giving the gift of music to her children and her vocal students. Before I bring her on, I just want to remind you that I have the Emotional Wholeness Masterclass and the 22-Day Depression Cleanse, both online courses that have just launched. You can find them on my website, CherieBurton.com. Right in the top there will be a banner where you can click on and learn more about them. I've tried to create courses that will really take people through tangible, real, true, honest to goodness things that work. Very practical, very simple, step by baby step. So without further ado, let's bring on my soul sister and friend, Jen Marco. So I met you, Jen, in 2007. We were having this little conversation before about when did we meet? And I met you. You had just had your third child, and I was sort of this like radical woman having a workshop on energy work and the divine feminine. And I was like this little resident heretic trying to do my thing. And you came and then we just met, and I was like, oh, dang, that is a soul sister right there. And then I asked you to sing like on demand. And you went out to your car or something and you like rewrote some of the phrasing or something and then sang it. And everybody was a puddle. Everybody was bawling.
That was such an interesting day because I remember coming to your workshop and feeling like I really need to do something to shift in my life. Like I was dealing with postpartum after having my third child. I was not in my typical physical body that I had been in before. Like I did not bounce back after that baby. And so I was really exhausted. I was strung out. And yeah, I went and got this song from a CD track that was in the car. Remember when we used to use CDs?
Yeah.
And we put it into like this little boom box. I think I might have had that in the car too. We put it in a little boom box, and the song was called In the Meantime. And it was talking about all the things that somebody is in the meantime while she's waiting to get to be who she's going to be. Yeah, I'm not really in the meantime anymore. Now I'm just full out.
Oh, you are like, yeah, there's no meantime about you.
No.
You're in it. And
but at the time that we did that, I was in the meantime space. I was in the place of like, wow, I'm amazed that I was able to leave for a whole day to go to a workshop because that just wasn't in my my regular trajectory.
You're in the thick of the momminess and the figuring things out. And you had this like beautiful talent that I think all women, we feel the frustration of like, why would God give me this voice, this talent, this gift, this, for me, my voice isn't necessarily singing, but it is to speak out. So it's like, man, I've got these kids and I love them, but I'm so buried in life that it feels like this will never express.
I was actually just thinking about that today, about return of investment with being in the little kid phase and how it doesn't necessarily seem in the moment when you're rocking in that rocking chair for hours and hours that you're going to get the return of investment down the line. But now my kids are 17, 15, and 12. And I am so thankful that I spent at least a good solid year with each one of them breastfeeding and rocking in a chair and just kind of being in that space, because now the bond that we all have, I'm like, the times that they looked up at me when they were a baby are similar to the times that they look up at me now. And there's still that bond and communication, and everything that I gave up and sacrificed back then is now also coming to fruition in a really amazing and different way than I would have expected when I was rocking in those chairs. Like if I could have peered into the future and could have seen what was to come. I remember watching Oprah every day because that was my 4:00 highlight of the day before we had Roku and Netflix and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And she gave somebody a red carpet glamorous makeover. And I remember sitting there with spit up on my shoulder and thinking, I would just die to have one day like that. And now I have days like that all the time.
There's a season, right?
There's a season.
And that was back before we had YouTube and podcasts and all this inspirational content just flooding consciousness and into our homes and our devices. I think for the women who are listening to this now, and the reason I called it Women Seeking Wholeness is because I recognize women are all over that spectrum. They feel this burning desire to shift into a purpose or a passion or express their gifts or talents or whatever. And it's just not the right time. And that is the power of education, is you're in information gathering mode. And like you were coming to workshops, you were gathering it. It was like the force, the force.
I was in such a learning space, and I was trying to take in as much as I could at the time, and also still really be there and present for my kids and be present for myself in whichever ways that I could, while knowing, okay, I'm going to go into the daily grind of like diapers and feedings and taking this one to preschool and this one to kindergarten, whatever else was going on at the time. And I knew though that I had to still keep my mind in a place that it was in a growth space. And then it became like a growth spurt. All of a sudden I was like, wow. And I made some really radical decisions that have now led me to where I'm at today. And at the time, they were really painful, like leaving a belief system, a marriage, an extended family. But they all wound up creating exponentially beyond what I would have ever dreamed.
So you just have that real adventuring, like going out of the norm and what's accepted. And your personal story is so powerful, like the family constellation you emerged from, and not your family of origin, and how you just fought your way through the system, really every system. And
I really did. I look back now and think, oh my gosh, like the sheer gumption to leave home at 18 and then get on a bus to come to Utah at 21 with $8 in my pocket and come here and land and just start a life. And God really had a lot of grace over me to just sustain me and keep sustaining me and keep putting breath in my lungs every single day, that I would wake up and I would go, I don't know where the next meal is coming from. I don't know where the next studio session is coming from. I don't know where the next singing gig is coming from, but I'm trusting that I'm here for a reason and that I will be provided for. And I always have been.
Well, okay, we're going to get to this whole like system thing, and we're about to go into the real. Every time I talk to this lady, you guys, it's like, watch out, because stuff comes out. I don't even know, like, just, okay. But let's start with this quote. Patriarchy is now wearing a goddess costume and a feminine empowerment suit with high heels. Like Jesus in the temple overturning the merchandise dolls and exposing the charlatans, we modern women championing this new feminine movement have the opportunity to take a stand to say, not in our mother's house. Ooh,
come on now.
Sarah B.
Come on now.
Sarah B. Yeah, it's this whole authenticity around expression. And we decided when we were talking earlier, just so you audience members know, this episode is about table flipping.
Table flipping. Yes.
Because sometimes niceties are a good thing. And sometimes they're not warranted at all. In fact, sometimes they placate and keep people stuck and perpetuate paradigms that aren't healthy?
I was stuck for a long time because I wasn't telling the truth about myself to myself and to God. And I was trying to kind of play nice with God and try to be reverent and quiet and that kind of thing. And it just was not creating the healing that I needed to create because I wasn't in the place of being able to radically declare what I needed to say. I needed to be able to say, God, I need you to show up. Here's my confession. I'm not going to try to douse it with some Febreze. Let's just be real here. I'm not going to try to make something that's poo smell like apple covered poo. Let's get real and honest and actually tell the truth. And I have to tell the truth to me too and be accountable and responsible. I've really felt this flight out of victimhood lately that I can look at everything and go, okay, I can see where I came from. I can see situations in which I had some safety that was compromised and whatnot, that I was, a defenseless kid. But now I can go into all of that stuff and be really honest with myself and say, okay, I can recognize the things that have occurred and also recognize my part in those things and my response now and what I choose to do about it now, what action I choose to take now, and not be bound to whatever that was.
That's actually a process of spiritual development, not spiritual debauchery, like we've been programmed to believe.
Absolutely. I think being able to do that without having a lot of self-judgment and self-sabotage is really, really key, because we have to approach that throne of honesty with love.
Yeah. And there's that scripture, going boldly before the throne of grace.
Yes.
And you mentioned to me earlier that you had the moment where you're on the floor. Because there's one thing to have this nice, beautiful praise worship space, which is super high vibe, right? And that gratitude brings things to us. It's a nice place to be. And then there's also hey, I'm a human being and I'm going through some stuff.
Gratitude,
God knows that
hugely. And so does rawness, real raw honesty, because that's the thing that we are seeking with our friendships, with our relationships, but we cut parts of ourselves off in order to be accepted by somebody else. Or we think if they saw the real me, they wouldn't like me, they would run away, whatever. So it's when we have these relationships that seem kind of surface, what are they really accepting anyway? They're not even accepting the real us because we're not showing the real us.
Yeah.
We're not being who we be. We're being who we think they can handle.
Yeah. And the groupthink around what is considered spiritual or righteous, or, you and I have had these discussions over the years so many times about some of the dangers of tradition. And I'm going to throw this other truth bomb down that I read to you earlier. Traditions are basically just peer pressure from dead people. That's a quote by Sami Zaki. He's from India. Traditions are basically peer pressure from dead people. Is that not so true?
Oh, yes.
I talk about this before, but I was speaking with somebody else on another podcast, and I talked about how when I went to Africa with my daughter, Savannah, who's 20, and we go into this village and we're with these beautiful African people and everyone's feeling the joy and everything. And then the elder talks about how they circumcise the females at age 5. And I have the sickening feeling of, oh my gosh, what? Scratch the record, what? And so I go to this elder and I say, why? Why do you do that? And with a totally peaceful, joyful countenance and face and expression and all these pleasantries, he says to me, it's very sacred and it's a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm it really kind of rocked me a little bit because, it was really disturbing and I had to process it and all that. But when I got back home and I've really sat with that, it was like a divine tutorial in what else in the name of tradition is expected or programmed into me that does not align, that feels like there maybe is a smidgen of truth there, but yet it's missing the boat.
Well, tradition can turn somebody who is alive into the walking dead.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I see that often. I see people that are in this place that just seems so heavy because they're just trying to carry on something that they believe that they're supposed to carry on, but they don't even really know why. why they're doing what they're doing. And they're exhausted by trying to live somebody else's programming in their current life and to honor somebody's tradition, that somebody that already passed away and they want to keep doing the same thing over and over. But it's like, have you actually really thought about whether or not it brings you joy?
Right. Because that's what the gospel is, good news.
Yes.
And we're here to not just survive a suffering planet and martyr ourselves through spiritual suffering lessons.
And Jesus broke tradition.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was here to shake up all of the Mosaic law and all of these things that had been followed to the nth degree and to say, okay, I will heal on the Sabbath day. And I will go and talk to lepers. I know that y'all have cast them out of the community, but I'm going to go and talk to them and lay hands on them and heal them.
And I will go into a temple and I will go outside that temple. And I don't care if it's the holy ground. I'm going to flip some tables.
That's right. And I will talk to the woman at the well, even though Jews and Samaritans are not supposed to have conversation with each other.
And I will take this woman in adultery and tell her she's whole on the spot. And if anyone else wants to chuck stones at her, go for it.
I mean, there's so many things that he did that broke tradition.
Even going to John the Baptist to get baptized, who was that wild man in the wilderness with eating locusts and honey, is the Sanhedrin or the Jewish establishment.
Just about everything that he did went so against the grain that it outraged people. Just as much as he had followers, he had haters. He had people that just thought, you are breaking every law. You are doing everything wrong. Yeah. And I've had the recent thought too, that if I want to be more Christ-like, then I need to be more willing to be judged.
Yeah, I'm kind of there too. It's like he was popular, but he was not popular. It was his legacy that truly, I guess, deified or canonized him more than his actual life.
Yes. And while he was living it, like people always talk about Gethsemane and the cross. And I think, yeah, but he also had 33 years of suffering. I'm sure there was immeasurable joy as well.
Yeah.
But along the way, he had people that questioned him, that hated him, that despised him, that rejected him, abandoned him because he was just being the Son of God incarnate, and people had no idea what to do with what he was.
Well, and he's saying things like the kingdom of God is within you. Yes. And you're God's. And people are like, what? Who does he think he is and who does he think I am? Because that's totally heretical.
Yeah. And so if I want to be more like him, then being willing to be judged, to be willing to be disapproved of, and not that I'm going to do something that I'm going to put something out there in a way that I know is just controversial just for the sheer sake of doing it. But I think it's more about being in a place where I am willing to flip a table and say, I'm not doing this just because somebody else says that I should do it. I'm doing what I feel called and purposed to do. And if you don't approve of that, then you are welcome to sit there in your disapproval.
Yeah, I think for me, what's got me in table flipping mentality, it's not even, we hear about righteous anger, which you're justified with righteous anger. If you see blasphemy, if you see demeaning, that's what they were doing. It's merchandising that which is of God. For me, it's the feminine. And that's why I like that quote about the patriarchy is wearing a goddess costume and trying to say, this is who you are, and this is who you need to be, all you women. In our mother's house and in our father's house, it's humanness. Don't try to bypass over who I actually am. Don't try to take my soul sovereignty from me. You could look at the body as the temple metaphor in that instance. Mm-hmm. That's where I've kind of climbed into it. I'm like, hey, if Jesus was next to me and my body was the temple and he had my back and he was going before me and he was on my right and left side, and somebody was coming at me with a tradition or a principle or something that was so against my nature as a divine feminine soul and being, I believe that there's some table flipping that could happen on his part because he's my mediator.
For sure. And I believe that he does do that on our behalf. Like he is willing to take the brunt of the disapproval and the judgment and the anxiety. That's the thing that, like with working with clients as a vocal coach, as an energy worker, I hear the fear of judgment more than anything. That's what I've heard from hundreds of people, literally, as I've sat with hundreds of people one-on-one. the thing that they are the most afraid of is somebody's going to judge me. Someone's going to think I'm not good enough. They're going to think I did it wrong. And I think that's such an amazing commonality that we have, is this fear that we're going to be viewed as being wrong. So we try to do everything we can to cut off the wrongness, to shut ourselves down, to repress ourselves so that somebody doesn't look at us and go, oh, they're just being too much. And so we die in that process. We become the walking dead, the traditionalists that are continuing something on that doesn't bring us joy. We don't even know why we're doing what we're doing.
Singing in church, like the monotone. I know that drives you insane.
That's why I go to a Christian church.
Because it's so hard to sit and hear. I can't even think of a song. Like, it's just like, I want to stand up and I want to just sing this from my soul. But again, the fear of being judged. What will people think? What if I look too happy to people?
We can't really have joy, like exuberant joy. Gosh, what would that do?
And Williamson talks a lot about that women get more persecuted for being happy by other women.
Oh, yes. Because then we're not in the victim story together. And that's part of where we find our commonality, is where's the problem, not where's the possibility. We find more commonality in, oh, I've gone through the same thing, and oh, let me pat your head. And that's why I left in the process of ending a marriage and being in that extended family and everything else. I also left a project that I was intensely working on because it was a place of just continual grieving instead of continual up-leveling and really seeking our part of the patterns of things that were going on, the parts that we played in attracting the partners that we had, all that kind of thing. There wasn't a lot of radical accountability. It was more of a place of woe is me, but I'm even more distraught because this is what I'm going through. And I thought, oh my gosh, are we ever going to move on out of here? Like, right. you can be in a.
But there's a payoff for some people to stay in that space.
Absolutely. Jan Van Sant calls it getting high off of your story. I love the show Jan Fix My Life. I'm like, girl, because she throws it down with such hardcore, in your face kind of truth. Yeah, sometimes it's hard for something to be in your face, but if you're not willing for something to really be raw and honest, like for myself, I'm taking real raw and honest accountability for the fact that after experiencing a gym injury, I have allowed the fear of exercise to get to me in such a place that I'm like, okay, I'm willing to do something like this, but I'm not willing to push myself because I'm really afraid of having the same injury recur because it led to having chronic pain. And so I can look at myself and go, all right, I'm accountable for what state that my body is currently in because of the action that I haven't taken out of fear or out of whatever other justifications that I've come up with. And I know that if I was to go to some certain workshops, that I would have somebody probably get in my face and really be like, is this what you want? And I'd be like, I could see it in my head.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you're talking about the flight out of victimhood and just that raw honesty and radical accountability and all that, I mean, and tying that back to Christ, I mean, that's what he did. That's what a savior does. They take people from victim to victor. And so being that like radical person he was, that leader of, you know what, we don't have to play it like this, Jewish people. We don't have to do it the same way that our fathers and their fathers and their fathers and their fathers did. And you were born on the Mary Magdalene birthday, July 22nd. And you know how I feel about Mary Magdalene. She was written right out of canonized scripture because she was so powerful about love and the raw honesty and being human and just her expression of beauty and truth and just that allegiance to the soul, to your own soul. Mm-hmm. And the heart of that has just really gotten kind of obscured and lost. And that's where I get really impassioned, is bringing that back in to the discussions of spirituality, not bypassing over the humanness or the raw honesty. And to me, that's table flipping, because it feels like, why don't we start there instead of showing up all perfect into our faith traditions and there's an element of being broken versus being a victim. And there's a huge difference in that.
Broken and contrite spirit is the birthplace of change. But staying in a victimhood means that somebody else is responsible for how you feel. There's no authority in victimhood.
No.
You are lacking authority over yourself and over your life. And it also creates a void where somebody else can come in and be able to assist you with doing good because you're still stuck in like blame and shame and bitterness and unforgiveness. I mean, my pastor was talking about forgiveness in the sermon this week, and I got to hear it 3 times because I'm on the worship team. And when we do worship services, we attend all of the services and we listen to them all the way through. And so something different struck me each time. And I was talking about carrying around this huge, heavy load of unforgiveness, and victimhood ties right into that, right? Like, I can't forgive them because they did such and such, and now I feel like this, right?
Right.
That's carrying around this huge bag of rocks. And I want to be able to carry around things that are good for me. I don't want to carry around a bunch of heaviness and be bound and weighed down by this heaviness. So I've got to be willing to dump that stuff out so that the things that are meant for me can actually get to me, because I have space for them to be able to be held and nurtured and cherished. And if I'm not willing to let go of the things that have sometimes created a common bond, then I'm only going to be bonding over victimhood, not over victory. And I would
And
rather
that's where the drama, that's why the
victorious.
drama keeps happening, right?
Yeah. And it's been interesting because I really haven't had a lot of drama over this past year or so. I would say that around the summertime, I experienced actually getting baptized on my birthday in the Provo River, which was amazing, and made a rededication of my life to God. And as I've been doing that, I've just been peeling the layers back and going, okay, here's all the places that I was using something as a buffer so that I wouldn't have to get to the real. And dating and love, that was part of that whole equation. That was a really good buffer because, man, dopamine covers a whole array.
It's like blinders,
stuff.
right?
Well, it's like being on a crack high. And you can forget the things that need to heal because you're so overcome by those text messages, the presents, the flowers, the grand gestures, etc. It makes you think that something has healed, and really it's just being covered up by chemicals. And so as I've allowed all of that to be peeled back and entered into a state of conscious singleness, it's really been amazing to go, wow, okay, here's the ways that I was trying to put some bumpers up when I was bowling so that I would never strike out. And now I can be willing to go, all right, I've taken the bumpers off. I'm willing to strike out. I'm willing to like try to bowl and not hit a single pin, and to have Jesus meet me in the places that I've previously tried to cover up by doing what I quote unquote thought that I was supposed to be doing. Because like in this culture that I'm in, marriage is real popular. You're supposed to be pursuing it. You're supposed to be, seeking after a quote unquote eternal companion. And not doing that is my own form of radical. Is my own step away from something that is tradition, and my own step away from something that is patriarchy, to really, allow myself to be completely responsible and completely accountable, and to really heal from the inside out, the outside in, and to contribute whatever it is that God has for me to contribute to the world with like full potency, vibrancy, expression.
Yeah.
I'm going to be Jen the Baptist instead of John the Baptist.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, as it relates to tradition and kind of knowing like, okay, where can I bust out of the programming and kind of deconstruct what is my truth? And I'm not encouraging people to like challenge everything. That's not what this is about. It's like, what lands in me as true for me? What doesn't? And having the courage to, or the wherewithal or the awareness to say, to actually know when it doesn't. So let's go back to that with tradition and work in the inquiry and the questioning, because you have a really wise take around the question, bringing in questions.
So I absolutely love the book Being You, Changing the World by Dane Heer. And it is all about questions and being able to use questions to change your reality. And one of the very first key questions that he talks about in that book is the question, who does this belong to? And it is not a question that's being asked in order to seek a concrete answer, but rather to open up the awareness of, is this even mine? Is this my truth, or does this belong to somebody else? Because a huge portion of our thoughts, which then create our actions, our emotions, our responses, resistance, reacting, aligning, agreeing, huge portion of those thoughts are actually created by something that's not us. They come from family, from faith, from pop culture, from friends, from opinions, from things that we've read in a magazine. So there's a whole lot of things going through our brains that don't actually belong to us. And the way that he talks about distinguishing it, and the way that I've also found to be extremely helpful, is to just feel into whether or not something is light or heavy. And if something feels really heavy, there's a lie that's present. And most people have been carrying around heaviness because they've tried to make something belong to them that doesn't actually belong to them.
And it really is that simple, isn't it? How does this
so
feel
simple.
in my body?
How does it feel in my body? Because especially as women, we carry so much in our womb. There's great depth and power in the womb energy, which is, in my opinion, why patriarchy has tried to encourage us to cut it off. They're like, wear Spanx, wear corsets, do something.
Oh, that's so interesting, because that's the whole Mary Magdalene thing right there. Creation chakra, second chakra, womb energy.
Yep. We've been told that our stomachs need to be flat, that they need to be small, that they need to be a certain thing to be appealing. Like, wow, how much life force and womb energy are we cutting off by having to diminish that? So if you can feel into your body, you'll usually feel it in your gut. You'll usually feel it in your womb. And your womb will tell you whether or not something is actually true for you. There may be something that was true for somebody else, but it's not actually true for us. And you can feel that pit in your stomach. And when you feel the pit, if you're trying to take what's a pit in your stomach and make that pit grow on up into being a tree, you're going to be carrying around a real heavy tree because it was never yours.
Okay, but hello, I want to take a little break here as I'm having this really engaging talk with Jen to let you know about an online course bundle that I am launching this month. Buy one, get one free. My 22-day depression cleanse and the emotional wholeness masterclass. In them, I take you through a very basic neurosensory 5-minute daily method, a detox to kind of reboot your biochemistry, and I teach you how to make a creation station. I teach you some really simple, powerful emotional processes that are very, very fast, sensory soul work, some meditations, breath work, even creating your own emotional emergency kit that you can use at the ready. So go to my website, SherieBurton.com. Right at the very top, you'll see that. Now back to the discussion with Jen, Jesus, table flipping, and tradition. Let's put a caveat in here, because there's cognitive dissonance where you can be presented with something that challenges your existing paradigm and you'll get a gut ache. But that does not mean that just because it's challenging your existing paradigm, it's not true for you.
Sometimes the challenging thoughts actually have a lightness to them, though. And that's true. Where you can tap into something and go, oh, okay. I mean, I think about Jesus saying, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Mm-hmm. Come to me, ye who are heavy laden, which is most of us because we've been carrying around heavy. Mm-hmm. And he says, my burden is light. So he's still talking about a burden, but saying that but it's not going to be heavy to carry that burden. Expansive thoughts typically have lightness in them, especially if it's something that's going to lead you up and out to your greatness and to the divinity that you truly be. But when something is just heavy, you will feel a burden in your spirit that you do not want to pick up and carry. And that's why there is so much depression and anxiety and pain and suffering, is from carrying all this stuff that doesn't even belong to us. I look at the atonement and I'm like, what am I trying to atone for that's already been atoned for? Right. That I'm not willing to just say return to sender and return to Jesus. If I say return to sender, something lightens up in my energy field immediately. It takes no time, but I'm not always willing to ask the question, who does this belong to, so that I have the awareness of whether or not to return it. And instead, I'm trying to make something that's not mine into something that's mine and then fix it.
I really love the power of story, like your come from and what brought people to where they are. And what I love and what's so inspiring to me is when someone's carrying their story in lightness, like the emotional charge of whatever drama, trauma, and whatever, because we've all been through trauma and all of us. So they're able to carry that energy and it's no longer like heavy. And so when they speak it, it doesn't sound big to me. It doesn't sound charged. It's not blaming. It's just, hey, this is what I experienced. This is what I walked through. And here's what I gleaned from that.
Yeah,
because I know
things that you've gone through are a gift. And that's another question that's a really beautiful question to ask is what's the gift in this? And also what's right about this that I'm not getting? We try to go into the wrongness and then make ourselves wrong for how we're reacting or how we're coping or how we're dealing. And then we're just in this whole vortex of wrongness that we can't get out of.
And that in and of itself is a false tradition.
Yes, it is.
Trying to make everything into a camp of right or wrong or black or right or evil or righteous or good or bad.
Right, because it's wrong according to who? It's wrong according to whose belief system, whose tradition. And that's, again, where going back to the question, who does this belong to, is really powerful because you can go, is this thing that I'm making wrong? Is it even my opinion of wrongness? Mm-hmm. Whose is this? Wrong according to what? Wrong according to whom? And when you've been in a place that has been dominated by the opinions of patriarchy, oftentimes patriarchy is going to make natural female responses wrong just because that's not how they operate.
Yeah, it goes back to authority. Mm-hmm. And in my paradigm, in my developing paradigm, I am the authority. When I'm aligned, I should put that disclaimer in there. When I am aligned, when I feel aligned in my gut, my heart, and my mind, then I can claim sovereign authority. When I'm out of alignment, it's like you're saying, like, I'm going to get triggered. I'm going to feel heavy. I'm going to be in my story. I'm going to be blaming and making other people wrong. And that is how wars start. That's how wars start with religions. Like most of the wars that have been started in the world have been started through government and religion. And I can start a war inside my being.
Yeah, I choose to not be at war with myself anymore. I choose to be aware instead of at war.
That's a good play on words. I like that.
Because I can have awareness that I'm feeling a certain sensation, that I'm picking up on something. And who does this belong to also can apply to the way that you feel. It can apply to having a certain type of vibe that you're feeling, because a lot of us are really intuitive and empathic, and we pick up on stuff that's not ours.
Yeah.
We can feel things from far away. We can feel other people's grief. We can feel something that is a result of like a natural disaster, halfway across the world, but we feel the heaviness of, oh, wow, there are people that are really suffering and struggling. And so when I ask that question of myself, I can also feel a lifting out of some of the anguish that I could be currently feeling, because I know that sometimes stuff is mine and a lot of times it's not.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's just not. And that's part of the gifting of being an empath. And it's also part of the difficulty sometimes. It's like, whoa, I'm really feeling a lot of things from a lot of sources and oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I think it's most challenging for mothers to not suffer for and in behalf of your kiddos.
Oh, yeah.
I actually had you're going to have to listen to mine and Gainalynn's podcast. We talked a lot about that authentic mothering, healthy family culture, where it's like you personalize and take on the burdens of your children. And like you're saying, coming back to like, is this mine? Who does this belong to? This is not mine. This is my kids.
Yeah. And it's a disservice to take on all of their stuff, because then they never learn how to do it. They won't learn how to cope. If you do the coping for them, they won't learn healthy coping mechanisms. And that's a huge part of what we're seeing in today's world and culture with the increase of suicides, is that a lot of people that never really learned, healthy coping skills. We have to model that for our kids to be able to say, okay, I won't take it on for you, but I will recommend some things that you can do because I've learned how to do this for myself.
So there's an amazing book called The Dance of the Dissident Daughter by Sue Monk Kidd.
I have that book.
Isn't that the most amazing? But she talks about how she was walking in, like during her awakening time, where she was starting to see paradigm shifting in her and old traditions and all of like her feminine power rising. She walks in to pick up her teenage daughter from work or something, and her daughter is bent over and she's like on her knees, like stacking things on the store shelves. And these two grown men walk in, and they're like, oh, one of them's like, oh, that's exactly how I like to see women, like females, like on their knees. And it was like, what? And so the mom is hearing, she's hearing this. And so that's some table flipping right there. She walked up because there's her baby temple, her daughter, the temple of her daughter. And these two men are coming in and saying this to her daughter. So she just like lets them have it. And it was like, oh, if we are the body of Christ, if we are his hands and his feet and his voice, we're going to flip some tables sometimes.
Absolutely. And a really powerful question that we can also ask ourselves is, who do I actually want to be? Who do I want to be? Not who do I think I need to be because these other people told me this is who you are. But who do I actually want to be? And am I being that in this moment? And what would it take for me to get there? What would it take for this to change? What would it take for me to be able to show up differently than I am in this moment? And it's not about making yourself wrong or judging yourself for what you are being in that moment, but just saying, is this who I really want to be? And what is it going to take for something to change? And again, it's not about looking for answers. It's more looking for awareness without judgment, without self-hatred, and just being able to move through things and go, oh, I'm being a reflection of something that is a tradition. I'm being a reflection of something I was told or programmed to do, and being able to step outside of that for a minute and go, this is really interesting information. And what do I choose now?
Yeah, I kind of look at things that are presented to me. Like if somebody says to me, I am the authority, I got this, you should believe this. So I look at it now and I'm like, okay, I look at all truth as this big buffet table, like Chuckarama, and they just put something on my buffet line. I am not beholden to take that because an external source told me this is truth. I'm your authority.
Nobody is our authority except for God. And we have to find and discover that through whichever way that we do. Like there is not even in the Bible, there isn't a one size fits all of how people come to discover God. David danced naked before God.
Yeah, and every time that people came to Christ with a question, he never gave a concrete answer. It was always couched.
Questions with questions a lot of times.
Totally. He dove into inquiry so perfectly. So he would put it back on them. He also taught in parables and paradox. And what he was showing us, I think, is that there is no absolutism.
Yes. We want to make things absolute because of the right and wrong game, right? We're trying really hard to be right and trying really hard not to be wrong. But then right or wrong according to who? If you think about the who, it usually will go back to because my dad said, because my bishop said, because my grandmother said, because this teacher said. It's usually going back to somebody else's words. And who knows what filter they were delivering that message through at the time anyway. They could have been saying something out of their own shame. They could have been saying something out of their own guilt or their own fears or their own anxieties. So we never really even know through what means that somebody was even trying to deliver a message. And then we've taken all of that on and all of the heaviness that even comes with, everything that's accompanied with, and then tried to wrestle with it within ourselves when really we could have just asked the question, is this light or heavy? We could save so much heartache. And I've trained myself to be able to be in that space with myself. I no longer outsource these things to other people because somebody may have a real strong inclination to white glove test, clean their house on the daily. And that's where they live. That's what their comfort zone is. They feel the best knowing that every nook and cranny is just completely in order. That is not what I choose to give my time and bandwidth to. And so who's right?
You're both right.
Yes, there, yes. And I've stopped going into a thing of like, what's right? And instead of landed more in what's light, because what's light for me is what's right for me.
Mm.
Because the things that are light for me, the things that I feel inspired to do, whether it's to take an hour and message a whole bunch of different people and just send them encouragement and speak life over them, if it was spending an hour doing that instead of cleaning a toilet, then what was light for me is what's right for me, because I was being used as a vessel. Now, granted, the toilet does need to be cleaned and it will happen at some point. But if I'm operating in the lightness instead of in the rightness, and instead of being in somebody else's task-oriented list, I think of how many things I would have missed if I stuck in the task.
Yeah, that's the Mary Martha thing, isn't it?
Yes.
So
yes.
Martha was so good at the duties and the domestication around service and beauty, and she was honored for that. But it was truly the person at Christ's feet in the humanness and in the moment in Mary. And I think about that a lot. If you're like me, you clean toilets and do your mentor calls. So I'm like the multitask.
Yeah. And I've definitely done multitasking. And I've also had times where I've just felt called to sit at Jesus' feet and to be in a space of rest and recharge and just allowing him to fill me. Because everything that we're doing is about chasing a feeling anyway.
Exactly.
If I'm going to go hardcore into the kitchen and try to bust that out, what's the feeling that I'm looking for as a result? Or if I'm going to go sing on a stage in front of thousands and thousands of people, what's the thing that I'm chasing after in that feeling? And I've learned for myself that if I instead generate the feeling that I'm trying to feel, that I will have a completely different experience and magnetize different things towards me than if I'm relying on the experience to create the feeling and to create the approval of myself because of whatever I did.
Yeah. The drivers of behavior are based around, we're just chasing a feeling. That's the driver of the behavior. And it's the feeling that you're attached to. And I was having an interesting conversation with my sister who has 8 kids under the age of 13. She's amazing, my sister Robin. And we were talking about how, these feelings of not enough or letting people down. And we're kind of talking about like our faith tradition, our church. And it was like, we need to have recovery programs from not feeling like we're enough as a mother. Instead of like everybody like sharing all these great ideas and like, oh, I need to implement that in my home. Oh, I should do that. Oh, she's doing that. Instead, like, why don't we have like interventions with each other around recovery from perfectionism and recovery from the right and the wrong, and this is more righteous in this scenario, and my home's got to look this way, and I got to be off. I mean, because I think even Janet could go in the reverse. Like, people probably look at you and go, oh my gosh, she's like the most amazing, talented singer, and she gets to travel and she gets to do all these, like, meet all these, celebrities and have all these opportunities. Like, there could be some serious comparison going on, right?
I guess I haven't really thought about it like that because I'm in my own head. So I don't really consider the possibilities that somebody might look at my life and be kind of like, wow. But I can see that because I remember having similar thoughts about people who were doing the things that I wanted to do. And can I just say from here on out that I am over the not enough dialogue. I'm over it. I see so much of like, you are enough. And I'm like, no. That is not even truth. It's not that you're enough. It's that you're infinite. Enoughness is not even on the table.
Amen.
To be discussed.
It almost feels like it has a cap on it. Like once you get to a certain point, then you're enough. Yeah.
And then who gets to decide?
Right.
Enough for what? Enough for who? Enough as a mother? Enough as a woman? Enough as a divine creature? So according to what? Yeah. And who does that belong to? So I go back to who does that belong to with that thing? Because I'm like, enough.
Someone somewhere set those parameters. Somebody somewhere set a consciousness parameter around what it means to be enough as a woman or wife or mother. And that's true for men too. But we somehow have this idealized framework happening.
And there is, because there aren't any types of concrete parameters or ways to even define this, it creates a loop. It creates a thing that can get stuck in, and you can get to a place where you're never actually in your purpose because you're just trying to be enough.
And what a fruitless pursuit. I mean, what if you just operated from, I am it?
Yeah. And if you operate in the lightness And if you operate in the expansiveness and what you actually feel that God is calling you to do, you will not go wrong. And there may be things on your grandmother's task list that you internalize for yourself that didn't get done that day.
Your grandmother's task list.
You know that it typically came from grandma, because our grandmothers were in a whole different space than we were in. They were being marketed that they needed to be doing the housework in pearls
and heels and an apron.
Child, they thought they needed pearls and Clorox to get the job done. And we ain't in that world anymore. We're in a place where we have to be able to rise up in our purposes. And sometimes the purpose is going to be as simple as laughing with your kids at a YouTube video. And sometimes it'll be as depthy as going out and ministering to a crowd of thousands of people. And all of it matters.
Right.
Every single bit, from the one-on-one all the way up to whoever you're going to be witnessing to on a large stage, and everything in between, as well as the moments of silence that you have with yourself, the retrospective moments, the introspective times where nobody's watching you at all. Nobody's being a witness to what's actually happening. But there's transformation that's being done in you. There's things that are being worked out in you. There's table flipping that's going on. And it all matters. And to think that there are things in that equation that don't matter, or that are meaningless, or that are not enough. Like, you don't get to determine my enough, because I'm not trying to be enough. I'm trying to operate in the divinity that I have been called to. So if you're going to say that there's an enoughness quota to meet with that, then you're diminishing my divinity, and I ain't having it.
Yeah, I love it. And that goes back to the absolutism and the being right. And we're going to create, like you're talking about, expansiveness and the lightness of it. One of the things my grandmother taught me is the work of the Lord is not burdensome. And even though that feels sometimes, an oxymoron, because Christ bore the burden, but at the same time, you think, okay, like, I don't have to operate. That's why I love the phrase wholeness, because that's what it supersedes enoughness.
And my wholeness and your wholeness will probably look like two really different things.
Exactly. And giving each soul permission to be their form of wholeness. And
yes, it's going to vary. And it's going to vary throughout your own life too. Like, you'll have different seasons of what wholeness looks like for you. And then you'll move into another season and another season and another season. And that's part of what we get to deal with, even with the weather changes. It's like that the earth is shifting, and we go through shifts too. We go through our own winters, we go through our own springs, and get to reap the benefits of the harvest. And sometimes we're down there in the field
exactly.
plowing, and we're trying to be with somebody equally yoked, whether it's a business partner, kid, spouse, whomever, so that we can be able to, get the crops prepared. And there's all those times that we could be like, oh my gosh, like, sometimes this feels so long and the days are hard and whatnot. But I still go back to, like, am I in my purpose while I'm doing this?
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what we started with, where you and I met, and you were nursing the baby, and you're like, oh my gosh, a whole day away. Like, what? This is so, like, oh my gosh. And for me, as I've worked with women and as I've kind of journeyed through my own stuff with feeling worthy, because that's been a wrestle all the time. Am I worthy? It's kind of like your enough thing. I don't want to hear that word either. I don't want to hear the word worthy, only because to me it denotes that I'm not already enough or whole or whatever. But the seasonal aspect of stepping in when it's right and scaling back to be in the winter of your life and to gather and to learn and to connect. I think the power of just letting yourself be human. Sometimes you need to incubate and hibernate. And sometimes it's your time to be on the stage, metaphorically even. Sometimes we are called to pass through things that are beyond our ability to circumvent or control. And so we get to be in, like you're saying, that living in the question, not about making it right or wrong. It just is. And
what else is possible is such a powerful question too. Mm-hmm. Being able to just to be in a situation and to not go, oh, it is what it is, because it's not. And it doesn't have to be. We can ask what's possible here that I haven't considered. And how does it get better than this? Every time I've asked, how does it get better? It does.
That's a good one.
I
That's
love
a good
that
one.
question.
That keeps
So
it more
much.
expansive.
I would rather live in the expansion than the contraction.
Yeah. And I talk about this a lot with my emotional healing stuff. It takes so much more energy to push something down and deep press it and repress it than it does to express it and let it out.
Well, and a lot of pain comes from resistance. So if you have a thought that goes through your mind and you resist and react, whether there's a charge to it or there's a resistance to it, most of the time we're not operating in a place of neutrality. We're either resist, react, align, agree. I'm trying to resist that or I'm trying to agree with that. So we're playing the right and wrong game with a lot of stuff rather than just asking, okay, what else is possible here?
Yeah. And, and maybe that's where we could kind of wrap it up because you and I could just keep gabbing from here to eternity. Just the whole absolutism versus nuance, like God being with the person, God being develop, such individuality with the paradigms we develop and the paths we walk. I love the quote, all paths are the path. And just allowing that for ourselves and allowing it for our children and allowing it for our communities and the world, because the highest level of progression, I guess you could say, that we're trying to attain is not our own glory. It's oneness and unity. And all of us really are like connected. So we can't go into this like super dogmatic, like, this is right, this is the right way, this is the way to do it. Because then we lose the beauty of the diversity that is in every person and in every tradition for that matter.
And in the experience of becoming. If I had operated on the same exact protocol every single day for the last 41 years, I don't think I would have grown because there wouldn't have been a space of becoming because I would have just been in the same routine over and over and over again. And I think about all the things that have expanded and all the lessons that I've learned from the things that people would label as mistakes or as trauma or wrongness or sin. But all of those different things have taught me and created empathy for other people in their circumstances, created awareness, the openness to questioning things and not questioning authority even, just being able to ask a question so that I wasn't stuck in a conclusion, stuck in a concrete situation. I'm like, I don't need to plant my feet in a concrete block that's being poured every time I take a step and say, this is it.
We have arrived. Look no further.
Yeah, I would rather not plant myself in concrete and live in a space of, okay, well, when it rains, it pours. Well, sometimes it pours blessings. Can I receive that? Yes, I can. Yes, I can receive the blessings. And as I've continued to do that, I've seen that things, oh my goodness, there are times that I look at the spectrum of my life and the mosaic and all the pieces that fit into the mosaic. And I think, if I would have cut myself off, shut myself down, remained closed, there are so many things that could never have transpired because one thing led to the next, to the next, to the next. I look at my tribe of friends and think, I don't even know where you all came from, but I'm so glad that you're here. I look at the tribe of experiences too. I kind of see that as a tribe and performances and the body of work that I've done as a musician, as a singer. I've recorded on 450 plus projects.
That's crazy.
It's amazing. And now I'm also branching out into doing more producing and being there as a coach for people while they're in the studio and getting to be a part of their dreams coming to fruition. And it's all just so astonishing that I think if I would have held myself to being in the space where I was so afraid of judgment and disapproval that I cut all of this off for the sake of what I perceive to be somebody else's approval or somebody else's tradition or somebody else's perception of what a woman should be or what a mother should be, I would never get to be who I be.
Yeah, I love it.
And I probably would have died in the process, to be frank. I probably would have, my body would have probably shut down as a result of that.
What if someone had told you to stop singing because you were a mom now?
Table flipping moment.
Yeah.
There were times that I did, and I remember feeling so depressed. I was like, I am not being who I was sent here to be. And
it seems rather cruel. It's a cruel thing to consider in the old tradition of give women all this brilliance and all these gifts, but it's torture because you can't use them because you got to be with your family.
And you know what my children have actually verbalized to me, which has been so priceless to hear my teenage daughters and my 12-year-old son say, Mom, we are so thankful that you are who you are because you've shown us what is possible and you've opened a door for us. Now my 17-year-old is a professional singer as well.
She's great.
And she's great. And she's sung in stadiums and she's doing things and moving mountains. And I'm like, trust the process, Caitlin, because the things that you're going through, you may not be able to see a light at the end of the tunnel sometimes. You may not know where that networking is going and what door that's going to open up, but just trust the process and allow yourself to be in the space of continuing to learn and hone your craft. But they've also acknowledged that one of the greatest gifts that they've received as kids was that their father and I got divorced. And that's something that's perceived in most places as such a wrongness. And they're like, you know, we're so thankful that you guys actually did choose to end that part of your relationship to say this has met the measure of its creation and that we live in two houses because we get to have such different types of experiences from being in these two houses.
Yeah. And that's why, again, we cannot go into a space of comparison or right or wrong, or this should be the ideal, because you are living, like you said, you are kind of walking a path of nonconformity. And when we look at really being Christ-like, there's the paradox right there. He was not a conformist.
Not at all.
And yeah, so I just love you. I'm so grateful we really went on a roll here. This is going to be fun to see how.
I'm excited.
But thank you for flipping the table today with me. And let's have a follow-up episode at some point and revisit this whole concept of women empowerment and climbing back into the voice and just being in the question. We could explore that further, but I appreciate you and I appreciate the example you are to me.
I appreciate you too. And I'm so thankful that you're opening up more and more dialogues with women and creating something around wholeness because we each get to define what that's going to look like for us. Based on our gifts, on our callings and our purposes and what our family situations look like. And just being able to actually say, yeah, you get to be whole.
Yeah.
You don't have to be cut off. You don't have to be just a part of who you be. You can be the fullness of who you be and experience what wholeness actually is through that vehicle.
Absolutely. Amen, sister.
Amen, sister.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. You know, she and I, when we get together, it's like two fiery, feisty women of faith, just bringing it home. I invite you to check out again my course bundle, the 22-day depression cleanse and the emotional wholeness masterclass that you can find on my website, CherieBurton.com. Please share this podcast with your friends. So many women are needing encouragement, validation, support, and diving into truths that they're hungering to learn.